So our theme has been from entrepreneur to exit to highlight the exciting entrepreneurial ecosystem that has emerged in Northeastern Ohio over the last 8 years or so. And there have been, I think, a variety of reasons for that emergence, including efforts by the state's Third Frontier program to provide capital, to stimulate private investment, and to put in place early stage support structures for new ventures. We've also had the creation of the Ohio Capital Fund to help attract institutional venture capital to the region. And all of these efforts have been designed to assist entrepreneurs in creating and building their ventures here in Ohio. And the evolution of bioenterprise is clearly an outstanding example of one of the vital support mechanisms for entrepreneurs in Northeastern Ohio that are involved in the life sciences. So I'm really pleased to be able to welcome Baiju Shah right here on my right, who is President and CEO of bioenterprise and has really been a driving force with that organization. And he will moderate our panel today. Our panelists also exemplify, I think, 3 of the region's outstanding dynamic life science entrepreneurs. Rahul Aras, who just arrived on the far left of you, is co-founder, president, and CEO of Juventus Therapeutics, a regenerative medicine company focused on the treatment of patients with heart failure and critical limb ischemia based on technology that's come out of the Cleveland Clinic. And John Snyder, right here, is the founder, president, and CEO of Neuros Medical, a neurostimulation company that's initially focused on treating amputees with chronic stump pain, and that's based on technology that's come out of Case Western Reserve. And then lastly, our third panelist, Jake Orville, is founder and president CEO of Cleveland Heart Lab, which is a very rapidly growing specialty clinical lab focused on biomarker technologies and the creation of proprietary diagnostic tests. So I hope that you'll all help us welcome this distinguished panel, and they will discuss the trials and triumphs of early stage fundraising. So great to have you all here, and I'll turn it over to Baiju.
Thanks, Clay. This is on, right? Can everyone hear me okay? Is this on? Okay. Great. Well, thank you, Clay, and thank you to the Ohio Venture Association for hosting this panel. As Clay said, the topic is really on the trials, the tribulations, and the triumphs of early stage fundraising, and we've got an opportunity to hear from 3 up-and-coming entrepreneurs in Northeast Ohio in the biomedical space about their own experiences. And while Clay gave you a little bit of an introduction about each of their companies, I thought it might be helpful for you to get a little bit more tangible sense of the product first before we start talking about the process that each one of them went through and some of the lessons learned as they raised their initial set of resources. So I'm going to start with John Snyder here to my right. John, tell us a little bit more about Neuros Medical and your product, and I'm going to see if I can move this podium while you're talking so that the group over here can see you.
Sounds good. So Neuros Medical is a developmental stage company. We are in the process of commercializing technology that was developed or invented at Case Western Reserve University. It's neurostimulation, but it's much different than neurostimulation currently on the market. We stimulate at a very high frequency, and as a result, we can block nerve activity. And so we have applications in a variety of chronic pain clinical states, and we're currently going through our second clinical. We executed our first in-man study last year. We had outstanding results with that. 4 out of 5 patients had over 50% pain reduction, at times getting their patient's pain level down to 0, which is just phenomenal. And so we're in the process now of executing a pilot, which is a longer-term study, and we'll also execute our implantable or completely implantable final product this year as well, with the plans to execute a pivotal next year in 2013 and move that forward into FDA clearance.
Great. And so just for those of you that are not familiar with the term neurostimulation, it's really using electrical impulses to target specific nerves in the body, right?
Right, for a therapeutic effect.
For a therapeutic effect. Great. Thanks, John. Next to John, we have Jake Orville with Cleveland Heart Lab. Jake, tell us a little bit more about the types of products and services that Cleveland Heart Lab.
Sure. Did you turn it on?
Yeah.
Works? Great.
Good.
Here you go.
Sorry. Cleveland Heart Lab is a specialty.
Small stage. Let's give you a little.
He's used to a bigger stage.
A specialty clinical laboratory and diagnostic company. We focus on cardiovascular disease prevention. We service thousands of community-based physicians who are seeing people like you who may have high cholesterol, not that anyone in this room has high cholesterol, or may have a family history and are really wanting to know if they have a true risk for a heart attack or a stroke. We receive thousands of blood samples into our clinical laboratory located here in Midtown every day, and we provide reports back to these physicians, giving them a relative risk of where they stand for their risk of heart attack and stroke.
Good, thanks, Jake. And Rahul?
So if you don't see Jake, you end up with me. We're a cardiovascular therapeutics company. We're developing novel solutions for heart failure and critical limb ischemia. Platform is based on technology that was discovered by Mark Penn at the Cleveland Clinic and really works with the fundamental understanding that after a heart attack, we all have stem cells that try to repair the heart, but that the system's inefficient. So a lot of other companies have taken the strategy of extracting your stem cells and delivering them to the heart. What Mark discovered and turned into quite an elegant project was that we have a specific factor called SDF1 to which those cells migrate. So what we do is we deliver the SDF1 to the heart. We never actually have to deliver the stem cells or extract the stem cells. That SDF1 signal pulls your own stem cells into the heart. When those stem cells arrive at the heart, they provide increased blood flow and really just a healthier milieu for your heart to recover. We just finished a phase 1 clinical trial, excellent results across the board. Probably the best way to describe it, other than telling you about bar graphs and charts, is take one of our patients, for example, a 44-year-old male, class 3 heart failure, was on disability. Class 3 means you really can't function in normal daily activity. 18 months after therapy, he's back at work full-time and taking night classes. So we're about to start a phase 2 in heart failure. The same therapy that we're using in heart failure has shown to have some benefits in late-stage peripheral vascular disease, which is known as critical limb ischemia. So we're also starting a phase 2 clinical trial there.
Great, thanks, Rahul. So I'd like to start at the point of inspiration for each one of you to join into a venture. All of you have got obviously many options in what you could do in your careers, but you decided to jump into a risky venture that had, at the point at which each one of you joined your ventures, you had zero resources, right? You had a technology or an insight, but you didn't have any funding in place, but yet you decided to take the leap. So talk a little bit about what inspired you to jump on board before anything had really been assembled. Whoever wants to jump in.
Tom?
Sure, I'll jump in. I was technically in Chicago and was there with a Fortune 17 company as a marketing lead for medical surgical instrumentation. And a lot of my career and background has been in areas of sales and marketing operations, spent a lot of my time with Steris and other startups, but went to a very large company and really felt unfulfilled in what I was doing in Chicago. And literally reached out to some folks here in Cleveland and engaged with Beiju, who I had known before, and really connected with BioEnterprise as a CEO in residence. And with that, had the specific aim in mind, finding technology, building a value proposition and really a vision of the business around it, and form the company, get it funded, and go ahead and lead it. And so came back in early 2008 and did that. And I think my whole career was kind of building up to that point, where I always wanted to do that. I was taking new positions throughout my whole career to really refine my business skill set, knowing I wanted to do that sometime. And what better time than 2008 when everybody was throwing money at new companies? So, I did a little research, found out a few other companies had been formed during recession times, like GM and GE and CNN and a variety of other folks. So I figured if they could do it, we could figure out as well moving forward. But, it was really, I think, a burning desire that I had to put something together. BioEnterprise was a great organization that I could tap into and partner with while I was out there scouting technologies before I went ahead and formed the company and moved it forward.
So Jake, what about you? You jumped into a technology. You moved your family as well to Cleveland to pursue this opportunity, and really there wasn't much there when you started.
Yeah, there were 3 of us that came to town. We were in Madison, Wisconsin. and had successfully exited a company with about 20 million in revenue, and we sold for $500 million. And we realized that really revenue is interesting, but technology and intellectual property and innovation is really what people want. We actually went to San Francisco, the three of us. We went to Boston, the three of us, looking for technologies. The economy was tough. We thought we could put some sweat equity into things. And through a relationship, someone said, go to Cleveland. Obviously, I've done business with the Cleveland Clinic and Case in my past. But we went to BioE, went to Case, and we went to the Clinic Innovations Department. And compared to what we saw in the coast, we were just blown away at the innovation and technology here. I mean, it was literally, not everyone has a chance to do this within a short time frame. We were just blown away by the technology. And so I think we became accidental entrepreneurs. We kind of fell into it. We saw an opportunity. Cleveland Heart Lab's the second Cleveland Clinic company I've helped start. And we've been very successful. But for me, it was just too obvious that there was a ton of technology. There were some really good local investors. There weren't a lot of managers, if you will, that were willing to put some sweat equity and work hard to get that company started. And that's what I did.
Rahul, you transitioned from technology transfer licensing to jump into a unfunded venture. What inspired you at that moment?
I don't know if inspiration was the right word. I probably didn't think it through completely. It seemed really obvious. So I'm a scientist by training. And when I met Mark and started to get into what he had done, as Beju suggested, I was at the Cleveland Clinic Innovations office, the one Jake just talked to. It just made a lot of sense. And in some level, if it worked out, which it now appears to be doing, the potential was going to be significant. So it was just an evolution, to be quite honest. And I think the evolution started at that tech transfer position where he came in, there was an idea, and it needed to be cultivated. And we started cultivating it, started going out and talking to investors, and it just kind of began, it was an organic situation, but then it developed into this. But I really think it had to do, echoing what Jake said, the technology. People often, and I think you mentioned it was risky. I never really felt a sense of risk when I was doing it, simply because it made a lot of sense. And from my perspective, something that makes that much sense, if you can execute on it, should get developed properly.
So it makes a lot of sense, but you're still jumping into a venture that's got a technology and no other resources. So talk a little bit about your initial thoughts on raising the funding. Let's start with the funding side. And what did you have in mind? And then let's talk a little bit more about what happened in reality.
Yeah, so, the best advice I gotten a lot of good advice from my board, but one of them is crawl, walk, run. And that's really the mentality we've taken through this whole process. And I think that the region provides a nice foundation off which you can start crawling and then developing the company. So we worked with Jumpstart off the bat. It was Jumpstart, the clinic, North Coast Angels, and we put together a nice seed round. And that seed round was with some very clear deliverables related to pig studies and what we'd need to do on that level. Once we got that, we started getting institutional investors involved, and we had a Series A that was about, I think it was close to $7.5 million. And that was on the day the Dow dropped 700 points in 2008. So we were the one good people who had a good day. And we're in the middle of closing a relatively large round right now to take us through the next stage. I will say that everything's actually gone to plan from an execution perspective. And I've been very pleased with our team on that. Fundraising is difficult, and the bar is high. And I probably went into that a little naively at the onset, thinking that, hey, if we do this, it's going to be obvious to them, too. It's not. And venture capitalists have a lot of opportunities, a lot of reasons to say no. But at the end of the day, I think what did prevail and helped us was good data, good team, and a demonstration that it's when we say we're going to do something, we've done it.
So now you framed it very sequentially. I'm going to stick with you on this just to really understand it, where you did your crawl, your walk, and then your run. When you're in that crawl phase and we're talking to Jumpstart and Cleveland Clinic Innovations, North Coast Angel Fund, and the others that came in that initial round, were you in parallel talking to venture firms?
Yeah, so we actually, so I will say at that stage, the answer was yes, and it was just too early for them.
Yep.
It was shortly after that we actually started to get term sheets from some groups. And actually one was a San Francisco based and the other was a New York based. I'd have to go back in my memory as to, actually one of the term sheets was at the same time as Jumpstart.
Okay.
And we said no to the Jumpstart, we said no to that term sheet because it was a bit predatory. And we didn't believe that we'd actually get to develop a company, but that we'd essentially be handing a technology over to.
And about how many sources, funding sources broadly defined, do you think you talked to assemble that initial seed round?
Geez. I would say 50.
Okay.
50. I mean, I could tell you in this Series B,
Yeah.
we're closing it. It's going to close next week. I got in a plane for the first time almost 2 years ago to start the process. So it's been a 2-year process. We officially kicked off telling people that we are now raising money at the beginning of 2011. And we have met with 60, 70 people. You know, the problem is a lot of times it's not us, it's them. They don't have money to invest a lot of times.
Sure.
And everyone has their, but we've pulled together a good syndicate, so it was worthwhile.
Great. Jake, let's talk a little bit about, assembling resources for Cleveland Heart Lab.
Sure.
Talk about the funding experience early and then,
The word I would use is resilience. And,
Yep.
I used to say everyone should wait tables and see what it's like to serve. And then I said everyone should sell and hear what it's like to say no. There's nothing like sitting down across the table and asking someone to write a $500,000 check and hearing the word no, 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 maybe, but no. It's really tough. And there are times I remember 4 occasions coming home and telling my wife, it was just not going to work. And luckily, I woke up the next day and said, let's try it again. We wouldn't be here. But it's tough. It's real tough. To Rahul's point, we went out and talked to local angels. And there are some of those people here in this room. And all we had was a PowerPoint presentation and a hope and an idea. And obviously, we got a couple people to believe in us. We also were talking to VCs at the same time. The importance for us is our Series B investment came from one of those VCs that we were talking to when we originally went out. And so the time may not have been as lengthy as Rahul described, just because they were following us. They had heard the Orly story. They wanted some risk to come out, and then they were there for us, albeit it was still a process, but it helped.
so when you're talking to funding sources of greatly different depth in terms of amount of resource, you've got your angels and you've got your VCs, are you pitching them with different funding levels in your PowerPoint? Are you saying, well, for the angels, we think we need $3 million and we're going to get to X and this will be the value inflection point at which we'll go out to the B, but next day you're on talking to a VC saying, we'll take 5 to 7 and here's where we're going to get to? How do you manage that?
Well, we were an early stage company, and all we needed was $3 or $4 million, and there were angels here in this town and nearby that were ready to do that, and were very supportive of what we could do. Once we saw the success and wanted to fuel the fire, that's when we went and said, now we should maybe talk to some bigger groups. But I'll tell you, and again, there's a few people here in this room, they've really stuck through with us much longer and more capacity than was ever originally anticipated, expected, or even hoped. And so, we never had a version A of the presentation and a version B. The company just started growing, and version B of needing more resources just came about.
Okay. John, what's the story with Neuros as you guys put together the initial presentation and went out there? Who were you talking to? What types of groups and how many? And
When I was putting Neuros together, we basically talked to everybody, from organized angel funds like North Coast, Ohio Tech Angels, Queen City Angels, to early stage VCs like Glengarry, other VCs that had Ohio presence, and then some coastal VCs as well. But part of it was understanding what the VCs wanted to see at what stage, so that we knew what the right timing was to go out to them, and basically to hopefully count on them as far as potential investment down the road. And really planting that seed so we can put that strategy together. But as far as a company, we've always pretty much planned our linear path. For example, a lot of great preclinical work or early animal work had been into this technology, very solid science. But the big question was, can this work in humans? And we had to get through our first in-man feasibility to answer that question, which we did last year. We also had to execute on some product development. Nobody had a technology or a device on the shelf that we could actually take and utilizing a first-in-man human study. So, you know, 09 gave us the funding to get through, in 09 we raised our A round, to get through 2010 and 2011 and execute on those two key proof of concept stages that we had to get through. But again, based on what was happening with the recession, VCs moving away from Series A and B rounds, a lot of the VCs that we were talking to still thought it made sense, but there's still that question of, there's still some risk out there. So, luckily, like these guys here, a lot of our current or A investors recently came into our recent round of A1, which we'll be announcing here shortly, and that has helped us to get through the next two key value inflection points, which is final product development and then this pilot study. But again, it's one of those where you have to talk to many people. We talked to probably 60, 70, 80 VCs to find the right fit, to find the right time, to also find out what their motivation is. You know, a lot of VCs will want to look to put maybe 5, 7 into a deal initially and then reserve another 5 to 10. If that's not a fit with what you're going to do, it's better to know that up front. So, you know, we're always fundraising, we're always marketing what we're doing, we're always engaging with VCs. That never gets switched off, and because it's a matter of really timing for when we're ready and for when they're ready to make sure that the parties are up to speed on what we're doing.
So I think that's an important point that we love to see in our entrepreneurs is it's always fundraising. You never turn it on and off. You're always out there talking, creating opportunities, creating options. One of the things that the three of you have done, perhaps out of opportunity, perhaps out of necessity, is you've also tapped into non-dilutive sources as you've scaled your companies or as you've grown. So talk a little bit about how that fundraising process works and how you sequence that as you're also out raising, private equity or venture capital types of money.
Yeah, and when I was forming Neuros back in early '09, I just started researching opportunities with Department of Defense, U.S. Army, variety of areas, because obviously in areas that we're playing in, nerve damage, peripheral nerve damage, amputation pain, there's a big military component of that. And literally picked up the phone, had a variety of conversations with physicians, clinicians at Walter Reed, other institutions, just to understand what the fit was and really to understand, did this have an opportunity and what they were looking for? And utilize them, their insight, to basically go through the whole RFP process, petition, basically U.S. Army and Department of Defense, throw a variety of proposals at them, much like the multiple shots on goal, a couple of them are going to hit. And as a result, we were able to make that $1.8 million of equity raised about 3 years ago last almost 3 years. We've raised about $1.2 million of non-dilutive funding just because there's really some strong fits with a variety of areas there, Department of Defense, U.S. Army, the whole Wounded Warrior Coalition out there. So there's a variety of opportunities that we had to find as far as additional funding sources to continue to fund the operations of our company, but it also made a lot of sense as well from a company going forward. We made some great inroads and connections with clinicians at Walter Reed and other institutions, which we hope and we plan will be part of our pivotal next year as we go through our final clinical to get our eventual FDA approval.
And how do you manage that within your organization? Is it the same set of individuals that are going out to talk to the VCs? Obviously, you're involved in both, or do you have a different set of individuals that are primarily responsible for developing the relationships and monitoring the grant opportunities on the federal side?
Yeah, initially, it was all me.
Yeah.
And as we built the team out, we had a really strong CFO, Mark Teague, and Ziping Fong, a really strong CTO. But still, I'm the point person on those as far as finding those opportunities. Ziping is connected in there as well. But again, it really relies on the current team, the current management team, to keep our eyes open for those and continue to hopefully source for those as we go forward here.
What about you guys, Rahul and Jake? Have you guys, I know you both have tapped into non-dilutive funding as you've developed your companies. Talk a little bit about at what point in the sequence you guys started thinking about that.
We have a really unique thing for an early stage company. We have revenue, and a lot of it. And that's our best source of non-dilutive capital.
Sure. We have grant revenue.
We're on track. We're 30 months old, and we're on track for doing $30 million this year in revenue.
Great.
So we are very pleased with our success. Now, we're not profitable yet, and so we still need capital. And so revenue will obviously drive that forward over time. But we got an early GCIC grant that kicked off Cleveland Heart Lab early when we were out talking to angels, and that helped us, and it helped get us a kick start. And then when we decided to move into a new facility and we were trying to select where to go, that included in Cleveland, the outer perimeters of Cleveland, and also other states, we actually went to the state and said, help us stay here. And so at that time, the state gave us a very healthy tax grant and also a regular grant to build out our facility and stay here. So we were able to kind of on the two bookends of our growth.
Right. Rahul?
Yeah, we're pretty opportunistic about it. We're benefited from the Ohio Third Frontier at Juventus, and actually another company that we've spun off of Juventus. We usually target a couple of opportunities a year to help develop the earliest stages of the technology where VCs just aren't going to fund that particular stage. So specific to heart failure, GCIC actually complemented some of the money that came in the seed round. Together, that money was sufficient to get us closer to humans. And to John's earlier point, the people who led our Series A were people we had talked with the whole time, and they were just kind of monitoring us going down the path. Our second indication, CLI, we did the same thing. We got a OTF grant through the Center for Stem Cell and Regenerative Medicine to fund us into clinical studies. And that really got us to a phase 2. And when you get into clinic, that's when the venture guys really start to get a little more interested in funding you. So we don't, to your point, I wear a suit when I do venture funding and jeans when I write grants. But other than that, it's typically the management team that's doing both. So we balance our opportunities, making sure you can spend a lot of time grant writing. You want to make sure that you have a high probability of getting it.
Oh, that's great. I'm going to have one more set of questions here to set the stage, and then I'm interested in hearing audience Q&A for our three panelists. So now that, let me fast forward a little bit in time. You guys have all raised your initial seed money from various sets of sources, sometimes professional investors, sometimes nonprofit types of organizations. But then each one of you has made a transition where you bring in venture capital into the capital structure. And talk a little bit about how that impacts just the dynamics between what VCs are interested in and their capital depth versus what your original investors are interested in and what they're able to do from a financing perspective.
I can start because, so we've gone through 2 rounds of VC right now. And I guess the question is really, how does that differ from the seed money?
Yeah.
You know,
how does it just change the dynamic of the discussion at the board?
No, I don't think so, but I think, you know, you hit on probably the one topic I would focus on. The strength of the company, and again, this came from our early board directors, really only as good as the board. We happen to, at a seed stage, have a very strong board of directors. And I think in the absence of that board of directors, we probably would not have had the ability to pull on new venture capitalists. And I'm trying to think, there's still members from that seed board that are very involved at the board level. The dynamic probably changes because you now have different parties with very different goals who they also answer to their limiteds, right?
Yep.
So the things that you were bringing up earlier, you got to think about, you have a fund 5 or year 5 VC come in who needs to get out in 3 or 4 years. You have someone who just started a new fund. Somebody who wants to put $15 million into the deal. Someone who wants to put $5 million into the deal. And in certain ways, they're all looking at making sure you develop a strategically strong company, but in the best interest of their fund. Sure. We have been fortunate because our VCs have played very nicely together. They all get along. They all actually have similar fund concepts and how they want to see the companies run. You know, interestingly, until this current round, we were 100% Ohio funded, which was not on purpose. It's just how it kind of happened. And the VCs that we brought into this new round are all people that have co-invested with our existing VCs. So I do think, you know, when you start looking at that VC round, syndicate matters. And the truth is, the VC themselves will drive that. We've had people come in from the coast and at times say, we think this is great. We've just never worked with these guys before. So that's another risk. We have to create a new relationship. But if you have a good board and you have reasonable investors, it's not really that much of a dynamic change for the company.
I think the end zone maybe changed slightly. But we are fortunate, we had great early investors, which include VCs like Glengarry, which included great sophisticated groups like Zappos Capital and Second Generation. I mean, these people aren't, casual board members. They really understand the game. They served as great board members and are still serving in some cases. So I think the dynamic in the boardroom and the board strategy is no different. The goal line may have moved out a little more because there may be another investor that wants to make a big return and has their vision of a big return, meaning more capital in, more capital out.
Yeah.
And so I think we're dealing with that dynamic now. I think that's just a reality. But I think how the company is managed and the direction that the board has given, I think we were very fortunate where we had sophisticated early stage investors as well as a VC at the table right from the get-go.
Yeah, I think we're just entering that phase
just started,
now.
right?
Yeah, so we have a new VC investment in this last fund from Rivervest, who is out of St. Louis. And so we're just kind of entering that phase of from the Jumpstart, North Coast Angel, Glengarry Venture stage of investment, and moving into perhaps maybe a coastal VC coming in, perhaps syndicating with another VC for our next round. But, again, very much like Rahul and Jake, our board, I think, is pretty savvy and pretty strong and focused as far as supporting where we need to go as a company. And so, I don't think that we're going to see 180-degree changes bringing out a new VC. I think there will be economic discussions as far as what they're looking to invest, what they're looking to reserve as far as follow-on, as far as a new VC coming in. But again, I think the whole board and the management of the company and the direction of the company won't change. It'll be interesting to see how that affects maybe the potential exit going down the road, if it's sooner or if it's maybe a little bit later. But we're just kind of entering that territory now as we move forward.
Biju, I don't think that's an accident. I mean, I think you're talking to three people that have said that they got the right early stage investor, and here we are. I don't think that's an accident. I think that actually really made the difference. There's money, which is not easy to get, but you can get it, and then there's sophisticated money. And I think, again, I'll just summarize that the people in town, not just from the technology, but also from the investment standpoint, they're as good as the best of them. So I think that made a huge difference.
And as you guys go out and talk to these national VCs, through successive rounds, what's their level of awareness of the sophistication of some of the earlier stage investment sources that have cropped up, not just in Cleveland, but throughout Ohio?
Yeah, from my standpoint, our Series B investors, who are Boston-based VCs, are very well aware of this area and very well aware of our investors. One of them in particular is on the board of GCIC, and so I think they do that. I think they plant themselves here specifically because they see great deals, and they want to be part of that. So I don't think that was a big convince.
I think it's growing.
Yeah.
Same with us. One of our New York-based VCs has done deals with and exited with a couple of our investors before. While going through rounds, I can tell you it needs to keep growing. There's a number of coastal VCs who will look at this and say, well, I don't really know about Ohio, and I haven't co-invested with these folks before, but there are, I think, Jake, these guys on the list, a number of exits that'll start coming in the near future, and that's going to drive a lot of attention. I think anybody who's been keeping up with the press can also see there's just more coastal investment in this area than there was even 5 years ago. Yeah. And ultimately, VCs want to see a return, so they will go where they need to go to make sure that they get the best investments.
Good. Great. Questions from the audience? Who wants to shoot first? Yes, Erwin.
Yeah. Businesses, any or all of you, spoken about the importance of your board, which I could not agree with more. If you could talk about how you recruit very, very good people for your board.
Great. So who wants to talk? Recruiting great board members.
Most of our board has always been our investors. The difficulty is they've had to take one hat off and put the other hat on. We did attract a very strong independent through other relationships. Former Governor Tommy Thompson, Secretary of Health and Human Services, was aware of us and decided to join, and that brought us great national visibility. But for us, we didn't recruit more than that, other than the recruitment of our investors who served as those board members.
Yeah, ours as well. Ours came with the investment, but again, they're very solid folks and very much in tune and join in for heavy lifting when needed. So folks like Steve Haynes and Clay Rankin and Joe Jankowski representing Case, and then we too have a very strong independent board member, someone with a lot of experience in the neurostimulation industry, has worked for a variety of startups, but also has some great contacts. So I think we put a nice board together. We also have some observers as well that have come on the board. So we look at those various roles as far as what they can bring as far as added value to what we're doing as a company and moving us forward.
So we're actually a little different. We've gone out and really identified, now over time, 3 different independents that were brought in. And it was in a large part because we were founded at a time when there was a guy named David Strand at the Cleveland Clinic who was the COO, and he was the chairman of our board. And the way the clinic structures the companies, they own a majority at the get-go. And so he said, instead of the clinic holding all the board seats, why don't you go out and find some people externally that can add a lot of value? And we've brought on a guy named Roger Newton, who co-discovered Lipitor and sold Aspirion to Pfizer for $1.4 billion. And he's a great resource to me because he's a been there, done that guy who is currently running a company, so I can call him. We got another guy named Matt Pullman, who actually came through a GCIC relationship, who has independently started his own company that's funded by a VC, NEA, big VC off the coast, and he ran the New Ventures group for Guidant and then Boston Scientific, so he knows what people like to buy. And we interact with them quite a bit. I think the key there, when you're looking for an independent director, even an investor, is these guys are engaged. They fly in for every meeting, they sit, they've gone over their board packets, and they have something to say. I've participated and seen other boards where people come in, it's 2 hours and they're thinking about what the next meeting is, and I can tell you this, I've never seen anyone pull a BlackBerry out at one of our, or I guess they're iPhones now, right? iPhone at one of our meetings. They're focused and they're paying attention.
Oh, that's good. Next question. Yeah, Jonathan.
This question is for you, Jane. How would the Continental United merger affect your business and what do you do about it?
You know, Jonathan, that's the first time I've ever heard that question. And I'll have to think about it as I just landed right before this. It hasn't affected us. It has affected me personally, as a flight to anywhere in the country is $1,000, and red eyes home aren't as frequent. So my sleep is lacking. But other than that, I think the reason you're asking is because we're getting a lot of shipments in. That's all being driven on UPS and FedEx. So we're the largest UPS overnight delivery in Cleveland. Our first truck shows up at 6 a.m., our second truck at 7:30, and then a third at about 10. And they're not seeing any passenger planes. So other than my angst, jury's out.
I fly out of Akron, Canton more. So.
True entrepreneur. There you go. Let's get the next. Yes.
I'm Joe White, here with Surface Corporation. So I'm hoping if you would share advice or thoughts on the trade-off between paying on equity and running redlining on cash or redlining versus giving up more equity for having more cash flow.
It's a great question. So the question is, how do you balance how much equity to take as one of the principals and entrepreneurs behind these ventures?
I mean, maybe my story is a little different since, or maybe not, but
Ours is probably similar.
Okay.
This guy has money, I don't know
Okay.
what that's like.
Revenue.
Sorry.
Revenue.
See, I don't even know what it is.
So, I'm the founder of Neuros. I almost said Steris. I'm the founder of Neuros. And as a result of that, I knew I was going to dilute down over time. But again, it's balanced with you need the funding to get through your various milestones and move things forward. And I think our deals as far as our A round and our A1 round have been extremely fair on both sides, both for the investor but also for the company. I think I still own enough equity where I'm very motivated to make things work as far as a company and also from an exit opportunity out there. So I think that's good for all sides. So, again, I think it's one of those where maybe my position's a little different, our situation's a little different, but it's just a reality of knowing you're not going to leave or be out there raising and have over 50% ownership of the company, you realize you're going to own X percent eventually, and you can do enough research out there to see what kind of is appropriate. There's enough data out there to kind of know that. And I think keeping that in mind, you don't want to be, I guess, equity-wise and pound-foolish maybe, and keep your company from developing and moving forward in order to hold on to so much equity that you're actually killing your opportunity out there. So I think it's a balance you need to make sure you're comfortable with.
As you guys are going out for a round, any of you jump in, there's a certain budget that you've developed to achieve the milestones that you're projecting. What sort of contingency factor are you putting onto that budget to account for things that you can't predict or a longer cycle to get that next funding?
I think the biggest mistake a lot of people make is they forget a runway at the end,
Yeah.
where you actually have to raise money. So we raised for an extra 12 months so that we can go out and go down that path. Also, from our position, similar to you, we needed equity funding. We said no to 2 term sheets, basically not because of what it would leave us with equity, but what it would leave as far as one fund having total control over the decision making. We now have a syndicate, and so there has to be a consensus decision amongst them. I think it's also, most good investors, they want to see the founders and the major players incented.
Yeah.
So their goal is not to dilute to a point that you're not going to have a good day. And, in my field, companies sell for hundreds of millions of dollars. You don't need a large percent to make that an attractive situation. And the board thinks about that when they put their term sheet in as well. At least a good
board.
investor does.
Yeah, good investors and good boards, remember. Yeah. Next question. You're Clay.
People talked about primarily venture capital and angel sources of funding. Have strategic investors played a role in your sources of funding, and how has that added to?
Yeah.
I think this is public, it is. We just had Takeda Pharmaceuticals invest in this recent round. They're top 15 pharmaceutical company. I think they have something like $16 billion a year in annual sales. I can tell you, you think VC diligence is difficult. That was 6 months of, I'm pretty sure they called my mother to see how I behaved. But it's really good. I always view diligence as a process that's just helping me towards a potential exit, because they're raising questions that at some point someone's going to raise. Having them on board also is fantastic as we think about developing the company, because they want to see us succeed. I mean, part of the goal here is for us to partner with them after this or at some point. And so they have at our Access their clinical cardiovascular team, their regulatory team, their marketing and branding teams, and they help us get into that network. And also in today's venture community, at least on the therapeutic side, I don't know if it's true on the device side, people like to see that. People like to see a corporate in the field.
But in your deal, do they have any special terms, special rights, options?
And that's also important. They obviously asked, and we didn't grant any specific rights. But the benefit to them is it's now an ongoing diligence process.
Right.
So at some point we'll have phase 2 data. Assuming it goes well, they're already a year into their diligence.
That's right.
Someone else has to jump on.
Do you assume that will be your acquirer then as part of it?
So, it's funny. I don't assume anything about the exit. I don't even think about the exit from that perspective. I just think about we need to develop this company. At some point, someone should buy it. And they're a logical candidate for that. But by no means am I focusing my attention or thinking about them as the acquirer. Because the truth is we're talking to a bunch of folks. And my mentality is we'll just develop the drug.
But will a competitor to Takeda be not as interested because they're part of your investment?
If anything, it's the opposite.
Yeah. Their interest will be
Having them
piqued.
in the deal, to the extent that there are no rights, gets everyone else a little bit more anxious.
Yeah. Joan, what about you on the device side? Did you talk to a couple of strategic venture groups?
Yeah, we started, there's an annual conference in our industry, and so we continue to, number one, introduce ourselves, but then also update them on what we're doing. So groups like Medtronic, St. Jude, Boston Scientific, all the various major players and potential acquirers are at these key organizations or conferences. And so we take those opportunities to say, look, this is what we're doing. Obviously, it's nothing that's we shouldn't share, but also update them on our outcomes. And so our feasibility data, our first-in-man clinicals, all those various things. And what they tend to know about us and they get familiar with us, they realize that as a management team, we say over the next 12 months we're going to do this, and we come back 6 to 12 months later and we've done that. They feel comfortable with that, that what we're talking about really plays out and is really true. So I think that's important. I mean, in addition to talking to VCs as far as potential investors, we talk to a variety of strategics out there. And we also look at those who may not be a standard strategic as well, maybe somebody that we partner with in a specific area potentially. So again, keeping our options open as we go forward.
I think it's an important point. I mean, just like I think what we heard from the three panelists on the financial point, that they're always talking to VCs, they're always talking to potential strategics, and it's fairly uncommon among entrepreneurs. There's many entrepreneurs out there that like to hold things close to vest, don't want to share a lot of information, and from our role at BioEnterprise, we don't see a lot of value in that. You know, we much prefer to see this type of interaction with the marketplace on a constant basis. Next question. Yeah.
Each of you are out there searching for IP. Somehow you went through this process, found that it was available, whatever you meant to, what was you meant to do. I go through the process. So much IP out there. Why?
How'd you select a focus area? And how'd you?
I'll tell a quick story. At the company before I was at, which I told you sold very successfully, I came in and asked the research and development team to put every skunk work on the board, every single one, and they came up with like 350 projects. And then we hired a marketing firm to come in and say, out of these 350, how many actually have markets, right? And 350 became 30. And then we hired our 3 biggest customers to come in and say, how many of these 30 do you want to buy? And that became 3. We laid off 180 people the next week. The point of looking for intellectual property, in our case, has a lot to do with the IP and the protection of that IP, but has much, much more to do with, is there actually a commercial market, and will someone actually buy it? And I think that's the big miss of an early stage company. In our situation, we got intellectual property that, although we use from an IP standpoint, it's different than the product we sell, because the customer didn't want what the IP was for. The customer wanted a different version of it. And fortunately, we had to work and struggle through the fact that we were going to modify what we do because we wanted to sell it. And I think there are too many people that have IP that don't understand and recognize that, and it becomes a battle, which a lot of companies don't win.
I mean, to Jim's question, when I was putting Neuros together, I basically looked at 24 different opportunities, and IP was just one piece of it. So probably looked at about 10 different areas that I stack ranked them on when I analyzed them, from market, reimbursement, the researchers, competition, what's out there now, what's in development that I knew about. IP was one of them. Some technology I looked at didn't even have an invention disclosure to tie to it. Others had IP that looked like it was going to get issued. So I looked at those couple dozen different opportunities and had 3 different categories. One was my target, one was my hold, and my other was my pass. And in that target, probably had about 4 or 5 different areas that I felt I could fold into or move a company or build a company around. So luckily, this technology, which has been phenomenal to really build this on, was what I took forward. But that was essentially the process. I was really going through and really scrubbing it from IP to a variety of areas as well, just making sure that this had some potential to move it forward there.
Great. Next question.
At the beginning of this, you guys all had obviously great things to say about Northeast Ohio, the investment community, both a lot of market. Is there discussion, maybe it's not appropriate to grow an exit strategy to keep that technology and the growth within Northeast Ohio after some of these exit strategies, or is that just not a negotiating point that anyone's willing to keep that allegiance?
For us, it's a value. We actually believe part of the multiple we'll eventually get will be because of our brand, Cleveland Heart Lab. No one's going to buy Cleveland Heart Lab and move it to Austin, Texas, right? And so actually, we built a facility in the Health Tech Corridor. It's a first-class facility because we realized that at some point someone was going to say, this is interesting, and we want them to see the value, and we wanted to showcase the value here locally. So for us, to Rahul's point, we don't wake up and think about exits every day, but when we do, we think about what are they going to do to just take what we've started here and continue. That will definitely be a multiple of what we're doing.
I'd say it's different in terms of what we've seen across the healthcare landscape. It's really different depending on stage of company and type of technology. So if you're purchased at a pre-commercial point of development, let's take NDI's example, where they developed their bladder stimulator. And they were purchased before they had actually generated $1 of revenue, and that was just to purchase the intellectual property and technology by Medtronic. Now, NDI didn't move, but that technology moved out, and the entrepreneurs behind NDI went ahead and created 3 new companies. And so I think what you'll see in the healthcare environment here in Cleveland is if it's an operating stage company like Jake's, we've had a number of operating stage companies that have been sold, they tend to be scaled around because there's too much to move somewhere else. But if it's a technology stage, you might see the technology leave, but the management team will stay and hopefully go on and create several additional ventures. Next question. I thought I saw one.
One last question.
Well, I'll take the moderator's prerogative on the last question. So you've gone through the trials, the tribulations, and the triumphs of early stage fundraising. What do you wish you knew then that you know now, having been through this process?
Exactly what that VC was thinking. No. I think it's one of those where you just continue to move everything forward on all fronts, from fundraising to product development to everything you have to do to put the company together and push it forward. I've always had a real aggressive timeline in what we've done, and that's by design so that we get things done quicker versus maybe how they usually should take. But I maybe, again, I think from this VC funding standpoint, with so many VCs no longer in that early stage arena, it would have been great to get some of those VCs maybe on board in our most recent round, or even in our A round if it was 5 years earlier. So I think it was more of a timing thing. But as far as what you know, I remember what you told me when I was putting the company together, and that was know what you don't know. And I think that was a key thing, is that really understanding what I didn't know and going out and getting information and answering those questions in a variety of areas as I moved it forward and took advantage of a lot of resources. So I don't know if that's a very good answer for you, but again, not really sure.
Jake, what do you wish you knew?
You stole mine, but I guess it was Beiju's. You do need to know what you're capable of and what you're not. And as an entrepreneur, you wake up and think you can change the world, and you do need a phenomenal support system, from your attorney to your accountant to your tax consultant to your advisors to your board. I just think if I knew how many times on a Friday at 10 p.m. you'd be on the phone with one of them, I'd like to make sure I let everyone else know that those relationships really matter.
If I knew it, I don't know if I'd still be doing it. But no, in all honesty, it's probably somewhat along the lines of what Jake said. I think it's a tough question because we're all on an upward trajectory, so I think we're all having fun learning what's in front of us. And at least on my side, there's no regrets. There's all, I wish I did it somewhat differently. It probably is how important every single component of the business is. When we started going from early late cakes to where we are now, board director at the time said, we really need to start working and changing this from a project into a company. And that actually meant something, because you're not just developing technology. You're hiring staff, you're building an IP portfolio, you're creating a name in the industry, you're branding. And you need to pay a exquisite amount of detail to every single one of those things. And that's also the fun part of the job. I assume every one of us still look at AED.
Yeah. It's good. Great.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Beiju and John and Jake and Rahul. Wonderful insights, and it's nice to have had you here. I'd also like to thank all of you for joining us today and remind you that on June 8th, we will be having our Venture of the Year Award, and hope that you'll all be here to enjoy that as well. So thank you, and we'll see you next month.